Hi y'all, I'm Evan and this is Magnolias in Sunlight, and I want to welcome you to our new series, DIY or Die, where we're going to make a spooky project every day of the month leading up to Halloween. In the spirit of counting down the days, our first project is going to be a Halloween countdown calendar. I was going to call it an advent calendar, but doing some research I found out that the advent is actually specific to Christmas. So we're just going to go with Halloween countdown calendar. It's kind of like the Busilla patterns, if you've ever seen those, or the felt embroidery kits. I did look up how to say that company name, and hopefully I got it right. But basically, these were patterns that you could buy, cut up, and then embroider on top of, usually with sequins and beads. My grandma made us all Christmas stockings, and then she also did make us a Christmas advent calendar. And because I love mid-century design, as I scroll through Pinterest, things like this tend to pop up. And I really loved the color palette of this advent calendar and immediately thought, what if we make that for Halloween? And I don't think it hurts that I had just gone to an estate sale and picked up this beautiful Afghan. So this color palette was very clearly on my mind. But of course, I want you guys to make all of these projects your own. Make things that fit your house and your aesthetic. And so while maybe the mid-century vibe is perfect for my house, and I love these orange and pinks and yellows, maybe that's not your vibe. So I have also come up with some color palettes here that you guys can check out. Screen cap them and take them with you when you're going felt shopping. I think all of these would be beautiful options to replicate this project in, and I think you should be able to find felt in all of these colors. Now, I want to be super transparent. This project did take more than one day. There's a lot of pieces, there's a lot of dry time, and there's a few steps. Some of them are optional, like the sewing. You could just glue this whole project and that will make it go way quicker. But I just wanted to let you all know. And rest assured, the rest of the projects in this series are something that you can do in an afternoon, something you can do over the weekend. And honestly, I think this project, if you really focus in on it, you could do it over the weekend and complete it in 2 days. I don't think this needs to take as long as it took me, but I'm figuring out the filming thing all over again, making sure I have all the angles and the shots. I'm sure I missed a few. I used to do this a lot, and I'm having to retrain my brain. I also ran out of some supplies halfway through and had to reorder. So it took me a little bit longer, but I think you could do it in a week. And like I said, don't lose faith. The rest of the projects you can do in an afternoon or a day. So I want to show you the first step of this project, and that was to make a full sketch, a paper prototype of the entire advent calendar. So we are going to be drawing, or I drew all of these icons, and then I cut them out. And so having this paper prototype really helped me decide what we were going to put on each square. And then once I had this, I could refer back to it through the felt cutting process. And then once I was laying the felt out onto the squares, and this one is actually to scale. I did originally make a smaller version that isn't colored in. This was just kind of the doodle version, I suppose, and where I was kind of playing with the concepts of what icons to use. And then when I narrowed all of that down, I put it to scale. These are all 2.5 inch squares, just like the felt ones we're going to cut out, with all of the little icons in place. And see, even here, I realized I didn't want two cats next to each other. So there's an arrow showing that these switched. And then you'll notice on the end one, there are some differences to there too once we started laying it out in felt. So the other thing that I needed to come up with were 31 little icons or little characters to put on all of our squares. And I don't have that just ready to go rumbling around in my brain. So that took a little bit more research, and I did go to Gemini, or you could use ChatGPT or whatever AI tool that you like to use. And this is the screen recording of what I typed in so that you can kind of see and what came back. And it gave me a good jumping off point. It gave me a lot of ideas. And then I also do have a Cricut, and so I went into the Cricut workspace and just typed in cute Halloween and searched that, which I also did on Pinterest and got a few great ideas there. And then I took all of those things and I piled them together and started sketching. Like I said, I had my little doodle version, which had all of these little guys on it, and then I picked which ones that I really liked and which ones made sense to make the full version, which is basically exactly what we ended up with on the final one. It's important when you're picking out images that you are picking out something that you can reasonably cut out of felt. Things that have way too many layers, things that have teeny tiny little pieces, the tiny pieces are actually doable, and a lot of the things that I did are actually quite small. I'll put in some close-ups here. Those little details are gonna make it look a little bit more professional, and also you can 100% do this on a Cricut if you have access to one. I chose not to because I want to make projects that everybody can make without having an expensive tool. I do have a Cricut. I have cut felt out on it with mixed results, to be completely honest, but that would make this go a lot faster, and then you could just piece it together. So that is an option. You can take this idea and throw it into your Cricut and make it there. So I think that's all of the admin at the top of the video. Let's dive in with the supplies list and the project steps so you guys can make this countdown calendar. I'm really excited to show you how it all turns out. So for this project, the first thing you're going to need is some large felt, something we can cut the background out of. You're also going to need smaller sheets of felt in the colors that you've picked. This is the color palette that I chose. You're going to need some hot glue as well as fabric glue. You're also going to need some fabric scissors. I recommend a small pair and a large pair. And you'll also need a wooden dowel. And then some extra things you can do, because there's a lot of room for interpretation of this project, are some little wood tokens. These are all Halloween themed that we are going to attach and pull out of the pockets using some thrifted pink yarn. And then to attach all of the pockets to the background, I recommend some cord or some embroidery thread of your choice, and then also a needle to attach that. And then we'll want some festive ribbon to tie onto the dowel to kind of hold this up. And when it comes to tools, I highly recommend using a square and a ruler and having those handy to cut out all of our pockets and line them up on the background. And then last but not least, a air erasable fabric pen for all of your little doodles and drawings. It will just help not have those lines show up. So this is our project. Let's get started. Step one is to cut our background out, and I am just using my template because it's to scale as a pattern piece and laying it directly on top of the felt. And then I'm using my air erase marker and a ruler to draw a straight line that I will then cut out all the way around. You could use chalk or a normal pen as well. If you use a normal pen and the ink isn't going to fade, then you want this to be the back of your piece. You'll just flip it over and start gluing your pockets to the other side so you don't have those lines on the edges of your finished work. And then up by the square, there's about 2 inches of extra fabric, and that is there on purpose. We are going to include that in our cut and then use that to glue our dowel to, and then we'll fold it over, which will give us a really nice clean line there at the top. Of course, I'm using my fabric scissors like I mentioned earlier, but you can also use a rotary cutter here and skip the drawing the line step. You could just use your rotary cutter up against the ruler. I just didn't want to get my cutting mat out, and I didn't want to cut through my cork background here. So we're just going to cut this out using normal fabric scissors. So now out of our other colors of fabric, we want to cut squares. So I tried 2 different ones. My template is the 2.5 inch square, which then I trace on here and cut out all of the squares. I also tried a 2 inch square. If you want to do a 2 inch square, this background might be a little big unless you want to do a lot of stuff around the edges. We're going to set up our square, because that's about where the top is. So we're going to line all of our pockets up on this square, starting 1.5 inches in. So right there is 1.5. And then you're just going to alternate your colors. I kind of guessed on this template, but it didn't work out too well because, see, these are white. It's because there's 3 colors, and so I'm gonna kind of play as we go. But I'm going to lay these out, and then I'm gonna put the decorative things on top of them. And if we need to swap flower colors or something like that, we can do that. Okay, so there is our advent calendar all laid out. And then because we don't have even days, I cut one that is 5 inches long. So you can actually see on the back the marks, not 5 inches, 5 squares long. And I'm just going to center that here for our Halloween day. And I'm using fabric glue because I'm going to blanket stitch around the edge, the bottom edge of each pocket. If you don't want to do that, you can hot glue them. I just find throwing a needle through hot glue is kind of a pain in the butt, but I like gluing everything down first so that I'm gonna bring the square back because I really want these to line up even after I'm done gluing them. But anyway, I like to glue everything down so that when I am sewing, things aren't shifting. So we're just gonna do a small bead of glue on all 3 sides. Again, we are going back in and sewing this down, but if you are not someone who likes to hand sew, you could also sew this on the machine pretty easily, just throw a stitch all the way through it. I just like the way a blanket stitch looks, and between the glue and the blanket stitch, it's going to be secure. So there's many ways to do this, but yeah, sewing, gluing, hot gluing will keep it pretty secure. So I'm just going to do this 30 times. Well, 31 because the bottom too. All right, so they are all glued down, and I'm happy to say that I did measure this out because I just freehanded it earlier, but I was only like, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch off having it center. So I eyeballed it, but I was almost perfect. Actually, it was more like 1/16 of an inch. It was really just like a few ticks on the ruler. I did end up killing a whole bottle of, I mean, it was mostly empty already, but I did end up killing this bottle of fabric glue, so you will see a different bottle later in the video. So just wanted to explain that for continuity error issues. She did. She's empty. All right, guys, so the glue has dried. We let it sit for a while, and this is where we are. And yes, I did skip a step, but we're gonna work backwards. I went ahead and blanket stitched the whole thing except for this top square, and I will show you how I did this all the way around so that you guys can see at least one, and then follow that tutorial if you want to make something that looks like this. I did mention before, there are multiple ways to do all of these projects. From color palette, you could do just large pockets like this down at the bottom and then sew vertically to make 5 separate pockets. You could do this on a machine. You could have left it glued. You can straight stitch on a machine and just make it that much easier. But I like this decorative stitch. I do this on a lot of the children's clothes that I sell on my Instagram, which I have linked down below if you're interested. I just think it looks cute. So I will show you, like I said, how to do it on this one. I left the first pocket high contrast with our thread. I went ahead and used this thread, this cord. It's like a yellow metallic because it just really popped well on my colors. And I didn't show this in the supplies video because I was planning originally to use some like fun embroidery thread, or I had a gold cord, like a true gold cord, that I thought would look really pretty. And then I remembered I had this, and couldn't make up my mind. So I did what any self-respecting 30-year-old woman would do, and I texted my mom and I sent her pictures of all of the options, and she went with this one, which was already where I was leaning, so it just seemed like it was 100% meant to be. So I did this very monotonous task of sewing down 30 of these while I watched college sports, and I highly recommend putting a movie on while you do it. Find some activity, use a thimble because my fingers are a little sore from pushing this needle through this many times. But I'm gonna flip the camera now and show you how I do this on this one last square, and then we're gonna get to the fun part, which is decorating and putting all the little like decorative elements on. We have our square and we have a length of cord. Obviously you're going to tie a knot in one end. This does tend to fray, so I have been switching sides that I tie the knot on between squares because the pulling thread, this one, starts to fray pretty badly. So I use this, like if I were going to do another one, this side would become the knot on the next square just to save thread. It's usable. You can't tell once it's in the stitch, but we don't want to just throw useful thread away. So we're going to go through the back. About right here is where we want to coming up through both pieces of fabric. It's a little far. It's hard to do this while I'm also trying to make sure I am on camera. Okay, so we're going to come up right there, as close to the edge as possible. The trick is that felt will pull. So I'll show you on the next stitch. You can easily pull a hole out of the thread or out of the felt, and then it'll start to fray. So I like to hold the edge here to avoid the needle from going up that way. I also was really hoping my nails would look cute for this video, but I've been gardening, so they're a little torn up. But I don't know what else to do other than glue fake ones on every time. So now we're gonna go through the corner to make this first start of our blanket stitch. And this is a little different because, again, I'm holding here so that the thread doesn't pull up the top. So pinch and pull. And after I've done this quite a bit, my needle is a little dull. So I'm gonna need to sharpen my needles after I'm done. So if you watch me tugging like crazy, partially it's because the orange is extra thick, and partially it's just because this needle is has been through it this week. So for this first stitch only, we don't want it to look disconnected. So we're gonna go under this first stitch. Oh, that's wrong. Okay. So for this first stitch only, we are going to come back up right next to where we were at the top of that stitch. Get as close as you can, but working hard not to come back through the same hole, because then you'll just undo your stitch, which I've done a couple of times already. And now we're gonna go under this vertical to create our first crossbar. You wanna go under so that it looks like it's connected, even though it's not, because the rest of these you loop it and it will be connected, and this is just the way I've found that makes it look clean. So to create our stitch, our real blanket stitch, we go through, oh, there's glue there, so it's extra hard to push through. We go through in a straight line. You can mark these out. If you really want a straight line, you can use a pen, you can use some chalk. I just eyeball it, and I think for the most part, it looks pretty good. We are gonna have a lot of overlap on these, so it really just depends how intensely you want to focus on that. So we're gonna pull most of the way through, leaving a loop, and then we're gonna come back up on the outside of the orange right on the outside, but we're only coming up through one layer of fabric, which is the background. And then we go under the hole. Pull through and then tighten gently. Again, we don't want to pull the felt out, and try and get this line to be as horizontal and straight as possible. As you go, they'll tighten up, and that way it looks a little more set in place. The first couple ones are still a little loose. So again, we go down one, about the same distance between each stitch. We pull through, leave a loop, and then we come back up and pull tight. So again, you really want to make sure that you're coming up through your loop. If you don't, you're going to end up making a, like the first step of when you tie your shoe, that kind of knot. I put lotion on my hands. Don't put lotion on your hands before you sew. It makes it nearly impossible to hold your needle unless you have like a rubber thimble or something. Okay, so I'm going to show you here. If you come out and then wrap through your loop on top of it, see how this thread is going around? You're going to get this, which we want to avoid because it makes it look chunky and messy. You can pull it through, but instead of getting this kind of loop, you're now getting this circle, and you don't want that. So we're going to go back out, unloop it, and then we go up, under, and pull tight. And see how that's a clean corner now instead of the looped corner? So that's what we want. So I'm gonna put this into hyperdrive until we get down to the corner. All right, coming to the corner. So we want it to look clean, and I'm sure there's 100 ways that you can find how to do this online, but I like to do a 45, kind of like if we were doing woodworking, we're going for like a mitered edge. So what you do is you get to your last stitch here, and then you're going to come kind of close to your corner, continuing the same pattern that we've done in the past. But instead of coming out on the edge, you're going to go up through both pieces of fabric as close to that corner as you can. Again, we don't want the needle to pull out of the felt. So push it down with your nail and pull the thread through. I also should have mentioned, but we're using a, oh, my dog just hit the tripod. I am so sorry. I should have mentioned, but this is the needle that we're using up close. It's for embroidery. It's like got the bigger eye, and it's kind of a giant needle, so it looks a little terrifying. But we're gonna pull through, go up through our loop, and then pull diagonally to the corner. And it can help. You can put your needle through your loop to kind of guide where you want it to go. It kind of just gives it a post to wrap around. And so that's our corner. And now you're gonna go right back to your straight line, coming back up through only the pink, only your background color, up through your loop, and again, hold this corner to make sure that you get a pretty line. So now we're gonna go all the way around the edge, and I will bring you back to show you how we tie it off. All right, so we've come to our last stitch. So it's kind of similar to how we started over here. We're gonna go as close to the edge as we can without pulling through the felt. Pinch the fabric so that it doesn't come out. And then we're going to come back up through both, kind of like how we did on the corners. We want to nail those corners down to the backing so that we don't have any pulling. Up through our loop. And then we are going to go back under this corner to create a hidden loop that ties it down to the back. And then we'll flip, and then we will tie it off a couple of times. And there you have it, a finished blanket stitched situation. All right, so now for the most fun part, and also probably the most tedious part, we're gonna cut out all of our little designs. So that means that we are going to check back to the template over and over and over, and then redraw them onto the felt. So I did this by color. I felt that was a lot easier, and then I would just go like square by square and see where all of the orange pieces were and then cut those out. A lot of these pieces are pretty layered, so I have cut out like the big background pieces of the white and the yellow, which you can see here. This is the cat, and you can see I cut out its eyes and put little like a yellow square behind it so that it has yellow eyes. You want to create that depth when you're making these cuts. And then we have the candy corn out of yellow. There was a lot of like larger white pieces that we build on, not so many of the yellow, and a lot of the orange I felt was just like the cute accessory pieces. And I really liked using this marker because it helps where you're not going to have the lines. It doesn't completely disappear like it would on a cotton fabric. I've used it on cotton and denim and all kinds of things before. And for some reason, it kind of clung to the felt a little bit more, but it does eventually go away. It was more noticeable on the white. If you're concerned about it showing up or not fading, you can do everything in reverse. So like for this candy corn, I drew it backwards and then you can just flip it over. A lot of these shapes are symmetrical, so it doesn't really matter. Front to back, they're going to look exactly the same. So if you have any of those that the lines are really showing, you can do that. But we're going to cut out, this is the orange band of the candy corn, and then we'll also I'm going to do the entire owl with you guys. This was really tedious, so I just picked some pieces. Obviously, this is fairly self-explanatory. You don't need to watch me sit there and draw all of these pieces out and then cut them all out. The video would be 4 hours long. And then I'm continually checking back to my drawn template to make sure that I'm getting all of the pieces. And a lot of these have a lot of layers, like I said. So for the owl, you have the crown, and then you have the nose. Then you have the background of the eyes. You have the pupils of the eyes. You have his little stripe. And then his wings go behind his body, and then his feet go on top of his body. So it's a lot of pieces to keep track of. And I found that it really helped. You can see there up in the top corner where when I cut things out, I used a piece of felt that I wasn't using and stuck it to that background, and it kind of kept all of my pieces secure. You can make layers of these, and that's how I kept track of all of my pieces. The bigger ones went in a Ziploc like you saw, but that was just, there are too many pieces to keep in a Ziploc and too many small pieces. And so it was kind of like, I think there's like kids felt books that do this where you can stick the felt on, or felt boards. I feel like I remember that from way back when in preschool. But that's the same idea of what I did, so that you could have your little storyboard of all of your small, tiny cutout pieces. And then when you went to glue, all of those pieces were together and in one place. So we're going to trace the pink mushroom roughly. Can I talk about a craft pet peeve? Obviously, I'm keeping all these scraps because I like to use them, and they go in the scrap bucket, and I've used so much of this already. Instead of just cutting out new pieces, I've found pieces in here that I can use, like for the spots on the pumpkin. I'm gonna use this, but don't take something with a flat edge and cut it out in the middle. That's crazy. We cut it out on the edge. We are utilizing as much fabric as possible. The same goes for a circle, man. Like, you don't need to put a circle in the middle of your fabric to cut out a good circle. And I'm actually going to extend this one a little bit because I don't want them to be exactly the same. want one to be a little bit bigger. So we're gonna round off that edge a bit. And then I'm gonna see what scraps I have. I probably don't have one long enough for this. I do for orange. We want like a that. Actually, that might be cute too. A little scalloped edge. And then this is the stem. That is cute. So we're gonna keep that. Happy accidents, you know? I'm going back and forth between these two fabric glues, and I have switched to, that's upside down, my real camera. I couldn't find my tabletop tripod, and so we've been on the phone for a bit, but no more. We are now officially on the real camera, and hopefully the quality is better. I will film the rest of this series on here. But yeah, so just kind of going through, I have noticed that my elbow, when I'm reaching across, has been picking up pieces, and then those pieces keep ending up down on the floor. So if you're doing this project, just be wary of that, and if you lose pieces, just know they might be stuck to you from the static. We are bouncing into fall, except you can probably hear this bird behind me that is just going ham right now. But I'm gonna start, I guess, on this side and work that way so that you guys can see. I can't back you up much more than you already are. So I added this star here. It wasn't in the original layout, but I had an extra star that didn't fit anywhere else. And this just looked like a kind of a dead space. I am also realizing that I haven't left a ton of room for the numbers. So they're kind of just gonna be like splotched in where they can, maybe on the wing over here. I don't know. We do have to add numbers because this is an advent calendar, but let's be real. I was more interested in making it adorable than I was in adding the numbers. Also, this is just a giant piece of scrap fabric that fit this hole fairly well, so I just used the whole thing at the very end. This was, I think, the last piece that I cut because I tried to do them somewhat in order. And this glue is just not coming out of the spout very well. I switched because I thought maybe the one that I already had open had been left open too long. I have two of them sitting here. So I got up finally from gluing with the other glue yesterday and went and hunted down a brand new bottle, but it's also not. So maybe I just got they came in a 2-pack. Maybe it was just a bad batch. I don't know. But it is nicer to use for all these little pieces, and then for like this big one, I'll just use this guy because it works fine. Any kind of fabric glue. The ruler is there while the letters dry just to keep them flat. I had a magazine on top of them for a little bit, but isn't he cute? Look at that little guy. I'm so excited. I love this. So now what we're gonna do is we're going to cut this dowel to make the top. There's a lot of extra fabric up there, which we talked about when we made the cut, I guess, where we cut the background, because we're gonna roll this up into this so that it'll kind of come down to about here. Right. So I've got a Sharpie, and we're just going to roughly mark a little on the inside. I don't necessarily want this hanging out. You could do it where you have it hanging out kind of like a varsity banner or something, and then tie your strings to that, but I'm gonna have it clean, and then we're gonna tack those on to the background so that we don't have any of the wood popping out. And now I'm gonna try and do this with a pair of scissors and see if I can just cut through. This dowel is pretty thin. Don't use your sewing scissors, use like all-purpose. Yeah, there we go. All right, so now we have our dowel. This will just be extra that we can use on another project. Okay, so our hot glue is heating up. My nice hot glue gun. The battery's dead, so it's on the charger, and I just want to keep going with this project. So we have my funky, broken backup hot glue gun at the ready. So we're just going to do a long line of hot glue, and we're going to line up our dowel right in the middle. Again, I don't want mine to really be seen, so we have a little overhang on the edges, and then we're going to do some more hot glue underneath it, another good bead, and we're going to roll that. We want this to be nice and taut and clean looking, so we have a straight line on the front. And then again, I'm just going to kind of now do a bigger strip. And then roll it all the way through. And I really want this to go underneath, so I'm going to use whatever. This thing fell out of a jacket I just bought at the thrift store, so you know, we use it as a tool because it's handy. And roll. Tuck all those little edges up and under. Nice and tight. Okay. So now we can turn it over, and we have a nice straight line across the top. Next, what we want to do is we're going to let this dry and make sure it's stuck in. Now we're going to make the top or the hanging pieces. We're going to paint some numbers and keep on going with this project. Unplug this guy. We need some hanging hardware on this, so I grabbed this little eye hook from my little stash of hardware, and because we have a wooden dowel in here, we just need to screw it in. The screw will go through the felt and then straight into the dowel and be really secure. If you were worried about it, you could go up through the hole here and add a little more glue, but once you find the dowel and it starts making contact, you just screw it in like you would in the back of a picture frame. For our hanging mechanism, I have these two ribbons, I guess you could call them, from Michaels. They were in the Halloween section. I just like how fun. One is like a velvet and then one is like a tencel. And then we're also going to use some more of this felt, and we're going to cut like a big kind of banner piece. But to get our lengths, I have up here, it's probably hard to tell, but there is a sewing pen there. And so I want this to trail a little bit, and we're just going to go up over the sewing pen and down, and then I can cut. Okay, so start over here again, go up around that sewing pin, which is just stuck into the cork. It's not like really deep in there. Maybe I'll do 3 of these because the sparkles act like really nice. We have our pink felt, which is left over from the big bolt that I got at the thrift store. And we're going to use our ruler, and I think just go off of the width of the ruler. So usually that's a little over 1 inch. And we're going to use our little fabric marker and gently make a line. take my two ends, and I want these to be V'd, like a really pretty dramatic V. So now this will be our hanger, and it'll fold over at the top like this, and then these will trail out. Okay guys, so I've heated up my hot glue gun again because we're gonna work on the last part of our ribbon. I really wanted to have like a pink candy corn ribbon. That's what I've envisioned, but I couldn't find one. So what do? When we can't find the thing we want, we DIY it. So I cut a strip out of my pink felt that matches the background, and then we're kind of going to fake the rest of it. So these are pinned in, but we cut two smaller pieces that kind of look like a bookmark. So we have the top is just squared off, and then to make it look finished, I'll explain all of this better in a moment. And we also made about 1,000, not really, like, I don't know, 18 candy corns. So I am going to hot glue this because I don't want to wait for any more dry time. I just want it to be done, and hot glue will hold this felt together very well. This isn't going to be seen because we didn't use hot glue here because we didn't want the rippling of the hot glue, but on the back you're not even going to notice it. So we have some overhang here. I want to make sure. Yeah. Okay, so we have some overhang here, which we want, and we're doing that on purpose because we want this to flare out at an angle, and then this will cover that, kind of like the top of a bow, but we don't want a bow because then there's the loops and stuff I think would be too much here. So we're gonna flip this back, hoping not to move everything. Felt sticks together, so remember that. We're gonna put the glue on the dowel part because we want to make sure that that's the part that's sticking to the felt. Keep our center point up here. I have it pinned into my cork board, but this cork isn't super thick, so it's a very gentle pin, so it does pull out. So just keep that in mind. And then this will stick. And then for this piece to cover all of this, and then remember, we want this to still be seen. We don't want to cover it up, but we want it to kind of interact with these pieces. So we're going to fold down to a point because that will just look pretty and fit in here. And then this one's going to hang low, or hang in between our background and the other strip. So to do that, we're going to put a dot of glue here and here, create the fold. And you do want to do this step instead of just cut it at a point because these folded edges are going to look a lot cleaner. And then we're going to cover up, see how this fits now here? The point is here right next to our eye hook, and the other finished edge is going to go along this, this edge. So put a decent amount of glue, not enough to burn your fingers, but enough to get the job done and get it set. And we're going, trying to do this so that y'all can see right under the eye hook and right along this seam, and it's going to finish it off and look really clean. So now that will hang that way, our cute fun ribbons will hang here, and then we will put our candy corns on. Additionally, we do want this to have this this triangle fold here, and that's what we're going to hang, is from this bottom point. And I just think that having it hang and bunch isn't going to look very nice. So I am going to put a line of glue in here, again in a way that's going to be totally hidden. We don't want to see hot glue. And then we're going to press that down. And if you have any stringy bits, you can just pluck them off or use some scissors. Try not to burn yourself, and just try and keep this really flat so you don't get that rippling. Like I've said a million times already, don't like the way hot glue interacts with felt. I find that it makes it look, I mean, obviously glued, but we don't want it to look glued. We want it to look pretty. And then we're going to use one of our little candy corns. And there's, again, enough layers here. There's 3 layers that you can see where we put this together that you really shouldn't see the glue. And then that's going to kind of be our center point up here. Don't put enough glue that it's going to come out of the edges, just enough to tack it down.
I lost some footage here and I'm not entirely sure what happened, but we're basically going to use these tokens and a popsicle stick painted with the same colors we used our numbers. And that's what we're going to use to mark what day it is on our calendar. So we're just going to move the token from pocket to pocket. And I found that this was a really cute way to do that.
Alright guys, so this is the final project and I am so excited about how it turned out. I think it looks really, really good. Better than I honestly imagined that it would. A few highlights that I want to point out. The glitter on the numbers really brings out the sparkle in the cording, the tinsel in the banner up here. And I just really like that the banner is custom, and you could totally do that with some like 3-inch or even 2-inch grosgrain ribbon or something if you can find a cute Halloween ribbon at your craft store. I just couldn't find anything that I loved, and the pink candy corn ribbon was really on the brain. So I'm so glad that we took the time to make that, because it really ties everything together. And I just love that every morning I can come out here and move my little token, my little, I don't know, popsicle stick basically, from square to square. It's going to be a fun way to start all of the videos with you guys throughout the rest of the month. And that brings us to, I guess, goodbye. So I hope I see you guys tomorrow for day 2. We're going to make something else that you can hang, but that's the only hint that I'm going to give you. Follow along on my other socials. I will link everything down below. Subscribe if you guys are interested to see what else we have coming up in the next 30 days. Day 2, here we come.